if you want to get the players in really early, then you're probably going to have to spend more than you really want to spend on these players.
Exactly.
Is that then going to limit you in what else you can do? Is that going to affect future deals in terms of what the expectations are in buying players? But the reality is, I think that Arsenal's squad is pretty. It's already pretty good, and I love the fact that both Kai and Victor are going to get pre-seasons, which is really important for next season because
especially Victor.
Exactly, Victor didn't get that last time he joined right towards the end, and so I'm really intrigued to see that. You know, the whole Julian Alvarez story. You know, that's very much tied to maybe Victor's future, and I've got a lot of time for Julian Alvarez, of course, but I'm really curious to see what Victor can do in his second season, you know, for Arsenal, and if he can really kick on. 24 goal contributions last season, far and away the most of any player in our squad last season. So, yeah, I'm really curious to see if that, and with Kai as well, and how that relationship develops, and if there's something to be said about maybe the pair playing with one another as opposed to instead of one another next season in Arteta's thinking. So, yes, it's frustrating that they're, you know, the big players like Bruno aren't there immediately, or potentially a Vini Jr. But if it is going to be the case, I'd rather we got them than, you know, maybe went in early and got a player that necessarily wasn't available later on in the window that was a better opportunity for Arsenal. Are we saying, therefore, that because you can't get Bruno in before pre-season, we go and get somebody who's not as good because we can get them in earlier? Probably not.
I think that's actually a very good way of looking at it. I wanted to ask you, like, I did see rumors, I don't know for the credibility, but in theory, if Atletico Madrid was saying you can have Julian Alvarez, we'll knock some money off, but you have to give us Gyökeres, would you do it? Because I wouldn't, you know.
You wouldn't, no.
No, I can understand the logic, but
yeah,
I'm a big fan of Victor, man.
So I'm completely indifferent on this. Like, if it happens,
that's what I'm saying.
I'm like, if it happened, I'd be like, okay, cool. I can't wait to see Julian Alvarez play for Arsenal. But there'd be part of me that Victor's going. And the other part of me is, as I said before, I'm really curious to see what Victor can do in his second season with Arsenal. So I am indifferent. I think it's a win-win situation either way around. I think Alvarez is a better footballer than Gyökeres. I don't think that's unfair to say. But I think Victor's a better goal scorer. And if we're suddenly going to provide players like Bruno and, you know, in a dream world, Vinicius Jr., you're adding a lot of creativity, progression, and penetration to the box. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing again what Victor could do. But it's always a tough one, like, because I was always one of those that was really critical of Victor in the first half of last season.
We always
just didn't see it, and it didn't click. And I remember when I spoke to him in an interview that I did for FL in the second half, and when I said to him about how do you feel about the nerves, because all the talk was about Arsenal were nervous, you know, all the nerves going on. And he said, nerves mean you care. Nerves means things
mean
matter.
You're human.
And that was like, you know, you'd think a footballer would just be after their media training, like, you know, we're not nervous, you know, we're just taking this on one game at a time. But he was like, no, nerves mean that this matters and you're taking it seriously. And I was like, way better answer than I was expecting. I definitely gained a little bit more appreciation for him after that chat.
It's a weird one with Victor because I feel if you did get Julian Alvarez, I would like Julian Alvarez to be number one. I'd like Gyökeres to be your kind of rotation option, if that kind of makes sense. Similar to a few years ago when, it's a terrible example, but when Real Madrid played all their stars, there'll be games where the stars aren't making it happen and they'll just draw for Joselu. That's what I would want to see. But then it kind of draws the conversation onto Kai Havertz, in which he divides a lot of opinion, but I think many Arsenal fans, you don't have to necessarily, he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but you have to have an appreciation of everything he's done. He's put his body on the line for this football club. But that's not actually what I wanted to ask you. Obviously, you're not working for Arsenal, but I do look at it.
Despite what some might tell you.
Despite what some might tell you. He has a dream job of commentating on the club. He's not being paid. His bills are not being paid by Berto or Mikel Arteta. He just has an opinion that might be different to yours. But what I wanted to ask you, with the evolution of our squad, and up until this point, we have seen certain players like be key players, and then they've kind of been demoted per se. What do you think the future looks like for Kai Havertz, for Martinelli, and for Odegaard? Because forgive me if I'm wrong, they're all on quote unquote big money. I hate to have these conversations, but they're all on big money. They're key players, and they've got 2 years left. Surely Berto and Arteta, at some point, if they haven't already, negotiations have to start quote unquote around the new deal.
Yeah, I think Arsenal never like to see their players get under that 2-year threshold because it does open up a lot of uncertainty and it puts you in a more vulnerable position to lose the player for less money, and then you might be completely out of pocket in terms of what a player's actually worth. I think For Kai, certainly what I've heard is that there is a willingness from all sides to look to extend in the future. So I think Kai will stay. I hope that he does. I think he's incredibly underrated. I just really think that he is a player that people undervalue. I mean, he's now scored in 2 Champions League finals. Sadly, he didn't win the second one like he did the first. He's a big game player. He scores in big moments. And I just think that it's a really valuable player to have in the squad. Martinelli, to my knowledge, is not the same as Kai. There is not at the moment a willingness to engage in the renewal of his contract right now. And if Arsenal were to be presented with a reasonable offer, I think they would accept it for Martinelli. What that figure is, people don't necessarily like to hear me talk about valuations because I tend to be told that I undervalue them. I think Arsenal would get something between 40 and 50 for Martinelli. And that's what I think. I just think that's what Arsenal would get. That's not necessarily what I think we should get. No, it's a massive profit, but it's not necessarily what I think we should get for him, but it's what I think we would get for him was between 40 and 50. So I hope it's more, but who is going to pay the money that some people say that he is worth? That's the question.
And this is what I'm saying. There has to be a market, Tom. It's all fun and games saying sell him, look at this, look at that. And a part of me, I'm with you in that I want more money because you could argue it's not what a player is worth, it's what you can hustle. We've seen crazy fees. You kind of want our club to get on that. I think there's a market for Martinelli, but it has to be at the right price. You know, I think he would have a lot of offers from Europe, but it has to be at the right price. His wages don't necessarily help. We did buy him for 6 or so million, so we would make profit. I don't know if Arsenal want to, or it'd be the logical decision to sell him right now for all the Vinicius talk. It's only Zolis. So on paper, you do have a bunch of players that could move over there, but you've got Zolis who needs to kind of, bed in. You've got Martinelli and you've got Eze. I don't know where Arsenal are at with that. I did think it was either going to be either Trossard or Martinelli. If you get Vinicius, and God knows we all hope, then that kind of flips things. And the market hasn't to be there. Like the last club I saw linked with Martinelli is Roma. And I looked at it, Italian league, living in Rome, living in Italy. It would be amazing. But are they going to give you competitive wages? And are they going to give Arsenal something that makes sense? Probably not. So when you get beyond the paper talk, it's probably not the best. And also, when I accept Martinelli for what he is, I've kind of given up in that, he could play up front, he could do this, he could do that. I accept him for a tool in the toolbox. I know you're going to go backwards. I know when the game's open, you could help us. I do appreciate that you've got pace. Somehow Martinelli, despite him not being the 2022-23 Martinelli, even though his record in the Premier League sport, he finds a way to chip in with key goals. So if that's a tool in the toolbox, I'd keep him. I would say Odegaard's the one that interests me because I saw him at the World Cup. I thought that was his mini preseason to come back and be fully fit. Obviously, last year was stop-start. I got a lot of appreciation for Odegaard, but you do have Eze, you do have Nwaneri. It hasn't been so much now, but when I've read rumors, when you get away from centre mids and left wingers and Alvarez and this guy up front, it seems that Arsenal are open to signing another creative player. Like I remember us being linked with Nico Paz. So then that would surely make them look at Odegaard a bit differently. So what do you think for Odegaard?
So obviously there was that report, you might remember it early in the window. There was a lot of reports out of Turkey that suggested he kind of agreed terms with Galatasaray. When that came out, I immediately went to somebody who I know who is obviously very close with Martin, and they were like, "Mate, his agent's in the US." I don't know where this is coming from, and it kind of shows you the chaos of the transfer window, and the amount of misinformation that there is, out there, and the sense that I got at the end of the season was very different to the sense that I get now. And I think that maybe how he performed at the end of the season, how important he was, and also during the World Cup has had an impact on maybe his future at Arsenal, in a sense that a stay is becoming more likely than maybe people felt that it was at the end of the season. He had an excellent World Cup. He was, one of the standout players in the tournament, and was so consistent for Norway, and I think really only outshone by the man, of course, that you'd expect to, which was Erling Haaland. And I look at his role in this team, and I think there is a chance that maybe his role slightly changes, and maybe in a similar way to Santi Cazorla, he kind of starts to go a little deeper and becomes more of a deeper creative player, and he plays, and our midfield changes. Exactly. So last season, it was very much Zubi, Rice, Ødegaard, or Eze, but it was mainly Zubi, Rice, and Ødegaard was the main three. And so you had 2 players in Rice and Zubi that are not thought of as creative, advanced, attacking players. I think the next season that we're going to see maybe a shift in the midfield to be 1 player deeper and then 2 more offensive kind of midfield profiles, one slightly less than the other with Bruno, if that is, because obviously he's much better in kind of that box to box. But I think that maybe Odegaard fits with an Eza, both of them playing together. I think he fits with a Nwaneri.
Wenger would be proud of this.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there is a lot of stigma about Martin Odegaard that isn't fair. And I think there's a lot of fans that just have hated on him for a long time because they didn't necessarily like the manager, and he's kind of the manager on the pitch, so he kind of draws in as a bit of a lightning.
He's not a traditional captain, quote unquote. Like he's not shouting and carrying on. Even though he does shout, if you go to the Emirates, he actually is quite vocal, but he doesn't fit that mold.
Like he's not Tony Adams. Like
exactly,
that's just not who he is. But he is definitely a captain. Like he is 100% a captain, and he has been so good for the squad and for the team. And whenever you speak to any of the players, and obviously, yes, they would be, praising him, but you can tend to tell the difference when a player is talking sincerely and when they're talking in a media trained way. And the way that they always talk about Odegaard is incredibly sincere. And if you talk to anybody at the club, it's always very, very overwhelmingly positive about him. So,
and we saw in the World Cup as well.
100%, yeah. And his Norway teammates absolutely adore him too. I thought he showed great leadership in that Norway team during the World Cup. So I want to see him stay. I want to see him flourish. And I think the likelihood is that he does stay. Whether he signs a new contract, though, is another question. But there is optimism that is the direction that things are heading.
I love him. And then I've got to ask you about Ethan Nwaneri, man. Like, what would you like to happen? And in your honest heart of hearts, as much as you could guesstimate, what do you think the future lies for him on the 30th of July?
I think we're a year later than my dream scenario happening, because a year ago I would not have spent the money that we spent on Noni Madueke, and I would have invested all of that time into Ethan Nwaneri on the right-hand side. That's what I would have done. It's not about hating on Noni. I think Noni's a valuable player, offers a lot, but I think that it would have been a smarter decision to invest in this very exciting young player who's somewhat restricted, with Max Dowman now coming through as well as another exciting player who I actually think is more of a central player as well. It's difficult with Ethan, because I think that the problem he's got is the players like Odegaard, like Eza, and we're looking at bringing in Bruno. Blocked. It's such a congested area for him to get regular game time. If he has a really good pre-season, and he could do, because he started off really well, he scored a brilliant goal the other day against MK Dons in their behind closed doors friendly. If he does that and can do that consistently, and then if there's an opportunity at the start of the season, because players are still coming back to full fitness after the World Cup, and he hits the ground running there, you never know. Like, it might completely change things. Like, you think about what happened with Miles at the end of last season in just a handful of games, transformed his career. So there's nothing to say that can't then happen with Ethan at the start of next season as well. So that's my hope. Realistically, there's a lot of interest in him. He so nearly left last summer. Like, and when you hear kind of the stories around what went on, it's baffling to see that he actually ended up signing a new contract. He was so close to going to Dortmund. So
and they're being linked with him again.
And their interest has persisted, along with a number of clubs, both in Europe and in the Premier League. So he is hot property. The loan didn't go great with Marseille, but I think that was more to do with the managerial shift. And he does have to, I think, have a bit of a sit down and think about, what he really wants, what he has to do to really achieve it, because there is question marks a little bit over his application while he was in France. So I think there's something to be said about that, but it's nothing that any other 18, 19-year-old, that's got a lot of talent and potential and everyone's lauding you all the time. It's a very difficult scenario for a young guy to go through and to not feel a little bit overwhelmed, and in some cases needing to be a bit more humble. So I think that for Ethan, he's got all the talent in the world. I sincerely hope he stays, and I hope that we can really harness it.
It's a layered one, Tom, man, because I feel one thing, I do think talent always rises, but unfortunately, if you're coming out of the system at this moment in time, we're in a much better place. With the greatest of respect to, I know we bought him from Brazil, but Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Saka, like, we were very, very poor. Like, we had to go back down to basics. Now you're competing with players, whether we rate them or not, who are either international, signed for multi-millions, or Arteta knows what they're kind of getting. And as Tom alluded to there, Nwaneri's still developing in certain regards, not to mention midfield looks very congested now. Max Dowman's come in. Noni's been brought in for 50 mil. We all know that's Saka's flank. It's a dodgy one. I think you made an interesting point, because that's a point I share in that if there's one hope for Ethan, because returns are quite staggered owing to this preseason. If he can go into preseason, really pull up some trees, really take advantage, maybe even start the first half of the season, I say first half, quote unquote, and change Arteta's thinking. But then I agree with what you said there, Tom, in that he really needs to think, because I don't want respectfully to Reece Nelson, I think you don't want to become one of these young players which contractedly you are at Arsenal, but you're not really here. You're somewhere else. 1 minute you're at Fulham, then you're at Brentford, then you're abroad. You need some stability. Could that stability and settling down those roots and playing on a consistent basis be achieved at Arsenal? By God's grace, I hope so, but probably not at this moment in time. So maybe there is rhetoric with going abroad. And I also look at it in that there's several players I'd let go or would probably need to go. The Fabio Vieiras, the Reece Nelsons, the Gabriel Jesuses, etc., etc. But where I look in terms of a fee, granted, Nwaneri's stock isn't as high as it would have been when he first came through. He probably brings in the most money. There was a point where I thought, oh, Miles Lewis-Skelly, it could go a bit left. Now, granted, that wasn't the case. So things can always change, but it'd be interesting. If it was up to me, Tom, I'd ask him and Arteta to sit each other down, have an honest conversation. And then if Arteta isn't really giving any specifics, let's put you on the loan circuit and see where we can go from there, man. So yeah, we're gonna have to see what they're saying. I gotta ask you about this, man. I have to. We've been waiting, we've been dilly-dallying. Like, talk to me about Vini Jr.
Well, this story is just nuts, really. Like, from the reality of it to the hope that it gives you and that full sense of, oh, this might actually be possible, sort of thing. And then it's the type of story that, as I say, it draws you in, it brings you in, it grabs your attention, and then you get convinced that, oh, this could happen, and if it does happen, we're going to win absolutely everything.
Even the Tour de France, man.
Exactly, yeah. Arsenal do win the World Cup. No, I think, from my understanding, the situation is that Arsenal have the interest in the player, and it is aligned from the manager to the sporting director to the ownership that if you can get this to happen, they will make it happen. The problem that Arsenal have got is that they are not the protagonists in this story. The protagonists in this story are Real Madrid and Vinicius Jr. We are very much peeking into the windows of what's going on in the house right now. We are not inside the house of this.
We're staying on side.
We are very much in the queue. Open the bouncer lets us in for a good night is what we want. But at the moment, we're not being let in because there are discussions going on to determine what Vini's future is going to be. His preference is to stay at Real Madrid. So that's the player's preference. That's
the cold water on the story for me, man.
Yeah, it's not a shock that that's the case. What Arsenal are hanging on to is that the player and Real Madrid fail to come to an agreement on the contract renewal, of which he has only 1 year left on his deal. They are aware of Arsenal's interest. Arsenal's interest is very real. That's and when that report came out from Gary Cottrell, I think it was at Sky, who reported it, although Dharmesh Sheth, a good friend of mine, was obviously the reporter at the time who was reporting the story that came from Gary, has got so much stick for this when it's not even his story. And I had him on my show yesterday and we kind of went through all the...
I watched that. Make sure you lot have as well, folks.
Yeah, he's a top man, Dharmesh. But the report was quite definitive on Tuesday, which was that he is set to stay at Real Madrid was the headline. You know, that he's set to stay, and that was kind of like, well, it was fun while it lasted. But nothing, you didn't see anyone else follow that story. No one else was reporting around that story. No one else was saying the same thing as that story. And on Wednesday, and I spoke to a contact I've got who's within the kind of the Rock Nation side of things, which are obviously the representatives of Vini. The return message that I got back was that it is too early to say that he will definitely stay at Real Madrid and that Arsenal are alive to the situation if there is an opportunity to get the deal done. So we're kind of in this limbo purgatorial state as Arsenal are, because they're willing to kind of just see what happens. But if there is an opening, Arsenal will, from everything that we understand, do everything to make it happen. But as I said, we are very much on the outside, peeking through the window, hoping that we can see a little opening to try and get through the door. And until that happens, unfortunately, as I say, we are the second character in this story at the moment.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you think that's the best way to go about it? Because I understand the fanfare, naturally, that Vinicius Jr. being linked with Arsenal on top of us winning a title and us winning stars is going to provoke. But I feel the same way with Vini as I do with Julian Alvarez. Granted, I don't know him or his advisors. It just feels you want to stay at Real Madrid. Now, if Real Madrid or Vini come out and say, listen, no contract talks are going to happen, that's the end of it. That's a very different story. It just seems like we're trying to be, like you said, we're in the queue with the bouncers hoping we can be let in. I feel the same way with Julian Alvarez in that it looks like your preference is Barcelona. Obviously, if the dominoes don't fall for these clubs, then we could take advantage. For you, is that the best way to go? Because obviously, like we all know, Berta is obviously trying to do several deals simultaneously. Your plan A clearly has got to be Vinicius. If that doesn't happen, that's got to be a random Joe Blogs of a left winger. But some fans would assume it'd be wasting time.
Yeah, I get everybody's sentiment around this. Why don't you just go in and offer a Real Madrid X amount of money? And I said the reason is that that's just not where the scenario is right now. Arsenal have to accept that the reality is that with the players' preferences to stay at Real Madrid, if they're just kind of if they're acting just like a clingy boyfriend, you're going to put them off, right? So I respect the fact that Arsenal are being diligent here. They are. Vini and his people are very, very well aware of Arsenal's capacity to offer what he wants. But he is a player of Real Madrid at the biggest club in the world and is waiting to see if Real Madrid are willing to either compromise or if he is willing to compromise. Arsenal, I don't think, can really do much more than they have already done. It is my honest feeling about this. I think that people's emotion of the dream kind of idea in their head of seeing Vini in the Arsenal shirt is probably overcoming common sense in a lot of kind of views around this, is my feeling. You've got to be realistic about this. The realistic end result is Vini signs a new deal. That's the most realistic outcome from this. And so if that happens, you can't be lambasting Arsenal for not successfully plying away one of the best players in the world from the best club in the world. That would be mad to do that. But the fact that Arsenal are there, I think is so encouraging for where we are as a club. Like really, really encouraging. I mean, we were signing Pablo Mari 6 years ago. No offense.
Don't
Pablo
remind
Mari
me, man.
Or Cedric. And now we're looking at trying to get into the frame for Vinicius Jr. So that shows you kind of where this club has come. And as I say, the noises that you get from the Arsenal side of things is what you want to hear, which is that if this can be done, Arsenal will do everything they can to make it happen.
And that's where I'm at, Tom, in that by all means, hope, pray, make sure try your best to make it happen. But you're kind of crippled, really. Your hands are tied. I believe he wants to stay at Real Madrid. We'd have to really see negotiations go cold. I know Arsenal fans are tired of hearing about patience and things, but in moves like this, where there's so many moving parts, you have to be, and there's so much, journalists offering a different kind of story on it. So I would like the approach Arsenal are taking. By all means, they're kind of being receptive to see what could happen with Vini. And I couldn't tell you who these other targets are. And of course, it probably won't be another Vini, and people have their talking points, but there'll probably be a plan B. And again, once you get beyond the superstarness of Vinicius Jr., I more look at profiles. Like if the window ends, you've got a centre mid, you've got a defensive reinforcement, potentially a striker. I'd say the position we've needed to improve on for years is left wing. Fair play, Arteta. Boys, go and win us another Premier League title. So I'd like Vini. But like you said, I think there's been a lot of excitement with the fan base. Like even when it came out with David Ornstein, the actual headline and actually what you read, I was a bit surprised everybody's kind of taken the story and just gone crazy with it. Because for me, the most encouraging thing was something you alluded to there, that essentially if there's a deal to be done, all parties from Arsenal would like to get involved. Now, if you can get Bruno and you can get Vinicius Jr. or a player of that ilk, we're laughing. But again, people, it's early in the market. It's the 30th of July. Of course, I want the club to get a move on. Of course, I'd love to be in certain other positions to a degree, having these players in, especially Arsenal versus last year. But don't judge them at the start or during, judge them at the end, people. So that's what I would say. We've got about 7 minutes. I'm going to race through some questions some of you lot have asked for Tom. First one, Tom. Thoughts on City paying 20 to 50k to get youngsters in their academy? What should Arsenal do? What is the best approach to compete for young talent?
Yeah, it's a really good question because obviously this is a concern. Arsenal lost Chido Obi-Martin to Manchester United, who offered him a ridiculous amount of money to get him away from Arsenal. And the reality is that this is a result of what you're seeing at the top end of the market with your Elliot Andersons. It's because clubs feel that it's worth investing these smaller, I know it's still silly money, but relatively smaller amounts of money to get these younger talents.
Peanuts.
Because they think they're going to be worth huge sums of money later down the line. And it's cheaper to invest this amount of money per week on wages than it will be to try and sign them when they're at a Brighton or a Brentford or a Sunderland or whatever later on down the line playing regularly in the Premier League. So Arsenal have showed their hand with Jeremy Monga. They were not willing to go over their valuation of £6 million for Jeremy Monga when City were willing to do it. They were waiting for that to go to a tribunal because that's what it would have done, but they were blown out of the water by Manchester City in the end. Monga would have, happily joined Arsenal, but Arsenal did not offer what it took to get the player, and unfortunately they missed out on him. But we're seeing other players like Nduka, who's going to Manchester City, and I've mentioned like Cheetah already, and we've lost Aiden Heaven in the past as well. So it sucks that this is happening, but Arsenal are also looking to be quite successful themselves in luring some really, talented young players to the club. Cardiff's Dongshu, really exciting young player, youngest ever player to play for Cardiff. Arsenal closing.
He looks decent.
He looks very exciting, but the thing is, like, they're kids. Like they're so young.
Too young to know.
It's so early in their careers. Max Dowmans are not the regular thing. Sam Dean reported today, 16-year-old Milo Bernard from Crystal Palace as well. Is somebody that Arsenal. So Arsenal are there, but to ask about the money is stupid. It's stupid what these kids are being paid.
And I understand it. Again, a football career is short. I understand they're impressionable kids. I understand, in the best of days, when you've got these young men that are just doing something they've loved since a little kid, even though they're 16, you've got family members, you've got advisors, there's a lot of ears in your head. I understand it. I also am frustrated about Arsenal missing out on a Monga or whatever. But I more agree with that than our approaches for the like established stars, because these players haven't, not that I care what they're getting paid, but they haven't done anything, and it sets a bad precedent. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule. You'd imagine Max Dowman's an exception to the rule financially as well as his talent. Even when it was that the first kind of kerfuffle about him, we did that. But we can't make that the norm, because half of these players are not going to go off to do what they're projected to be. I hope everyone reaches their potential, but that's just the reality. For every Max Dowman, there's a million stars that they say is going to be this, that, the other. You get to 20 and you're forgetting that they're even professional footballers. So it is what it is, man, because it sets a bad precedent. Again, we're not going to do what Chelsea do. We're not going to do what City do, etc., etc. You got a next one, Tom. Tom, what are your thoughts on our staff changes, corporate and medical? Just normal movement, or do they speak to something? Also, how do you feel our academy is shaping up?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly on academy, I think obviously Pascal Damashak was come in very, very highly rated from Strasbourg and the work he's done there. So the hope is that the academy is going to be in a better place. So that's really encouraging. But the amount of medical staff changes is huge.
Crazy, isn't it?
I was listening to Clive talk on The Vision about this, and he raised a really good point, which is like, you just won the league, and it's a case of, for your player, and it's like, what's next? Like, what do you want to see come next? And you return to Arsenal after the summer, and there's all these new people around the club, particularly in the medical department,